Hi students, this is Mrs. Gifford and today's lesson is order of operations involving square roots and absolute value. Today is all about order of operations and we're going to add in two new grouping symbols called square roots and absolute values. So if you haven't done so yet, hit pause, get your paper set up, and then we will move on. So here we are with vocabulary. So go to your vocabulary section and go to the S page. The first one is square root, and the symbol looks just like this one. Kind of like division, but there's this extra little tab or this flag here on the left-hand side. And square root means to find what number times itself makes the number under the radical symbol. So here's an example. If, for example, if we had square root of 9, and you ask yourself what number times itself makes 9, thinking of factor pairs, you would say 3. And you would read this as the square root of 9 equals 3. Notice I did not put the square root symbol around the 3 because it's its own operation, and once we do the square root, we are done. Absolute value, it looks like an equal sign kind of turned up on its end, and absolute value talks about the distance a number is from 0. So if we had the absolute value symbol and I have the number -4, imagine that you were standing on a 0 on a number line, and I asked you how many steps would it take to get to 0. From -4, you would tell me 4 steps. So the absolute value of -4 is 4. In the same regard, if I have the absolute value of 7, same thing. Imagine that I'm standing on 7 and I need to walk to 0. How many steps would it take? It would be 7. So the absolute value, as long as there isn't anything directly in front of the symbol, the absolute value is whatever, or the positive value of whatever's inside. Now real quick, we've already talked about how to use the square root. So let's just do the square root of 9 again. I'm going to clear off my screen. And if I want to do the square root of 9 again, I do second, x squared, 9, parentheses, and then enter. And then to do the absolute value, it's a little bit different, but you're going to click on Math. Move it over to Number, and then the first one is ABS, that stands for absolute value, so go ahead and hit Enter. And I want to do the absolute value, so whatever's inside your absolute value symbol, you're going to put that in there. I'm actually going to put -4. I'm going to close it off with parentheses, and then I'm going to hit Enter. So there again is my answer of 4. So let's move into our examples. We're going to simplify each expression following the order of operations. Looking at this first one, we have these brackets. These are just grouping symbols, and we're going to do the work inside first. Thinking about the order of operations, are we going to add 7 and 9 first, or are we going to multiply first? If you are thinking multiply, that is correct. 9 times 2 is 18, so I'm going to bring my 7 plus down since I haven't used them. I'm going to put my brackets here. Whoops, I should be moving this to the other side. Divide by 5. Okay, I'm going to move these guys all over here. All right, so there is my work. Next thing that I need to do is add those two numbers together. So I am going to do 7 plus 18 is 25. And then I'm going to divide by 5. So 5 is my final answer. Notice as I'm doing these problems, I'm bringing everything down step by step so that if for some reason I make a mistake, we can go back and look at your work and say, oh, hey, here's your mistake, and this is what we need to do to fix it. Second example, we have negative times the quantity of 6 minus 9 squared. And so we're going to do the order of operations again. And I've got 6 minus 9 right here. If you have $6 and you take 9 away, you don't quite have enough, so that gives us -3. And again, because we can use our calculator, just to make sure we understand that, if I do 6 minus 9, again, there is my -3 on the screen. And now going back to what we have here, there's actually an invisible -1 right there. Do we multiply first or exponents first? Okay, we do exponents first, so we're going to do -3 to the second power. So I'm going to use my calculator again, and this button right here, this upside down V, is what we're going to use for an exponent key. I'm going to put parentheses and then -3 parentheses, caret, or the exponent of 2. When we type this in, the calculator knows that this means that it's an exponent, so I'm going to hit enter. And notice that's a positive 9. Now, why did that become positive 9? If you're thinking it's because we need to do negative 3 times negative 3, that's correct. This 2 tells us we need 2 negative 3's. So again, if I keep showing my work, I've got my negative 1 and my positive 9, and I simply multiply those two numbers together to get negative 9. One thing I want to point out to you, if you did not put the negative 3 inside parentheses, look what happens to that answer. Notice it becomes a negative 9, so we have to be very careful and cognizant of putting that negative 3 inside those parentheses. So next examples. We've got 2 more examples to do, and then we'll get you on your way. So example C, negative 4, absolute value of negative 5 plus 2 squared. One thing that I didn't mention before, anytime there's a number next to an absolute value, we want to treat it like multiplication, just like if it's next to the parentheses. And then we're going to continue following the order of operations. As I said previously, the square root and absolute value symbols are grouping symbols. So the first thing we need to do is figure out the value of what's inside. I'm going to keep my negative 4 outside the absolute value. And before I use the calculator, what do you think negative 5 plus 2 is? Okay, so if you are thinking negative 3, good job. So I'm going to put negative 3 inside the parentheses. Okay, and using absolute values again is its own operation. So before we move into doing this exponent, again, I'm going to keep my negative 4 times, and now I'm going to figure out the absolute value of what's inside that. Again, if you don't remember that this would end up being 3, the way that you get to absolute value is click on the math key, move it over to number, and the very first one there is absolute value. And then I'm going to put negative 3 inside there. So here's the 3. You can hear Mr. Zambrino talking in the background. Oh, and the bell. Hopefully everybody is safe inside their afternoon activities and classrooms. So we're going to keep doing this, and I have 3 squared. Again, we do exponents before we do any multiplication. 3 squared, again, is not 6. That's the most common mistake. And if you do not remember how to do it, you're going to use this caret key for the exponents. And there becomes the 9, so negative 4 times 9. And to figure out what this answer is, again, you are going to be able to use the calculator. So if I want to do negative 4 times 9, there is negative 36. So again, those absolute value symbols are grouping symbols. Take care of everything inside first. All right, last example, we have a negative square root of 49 plus the quantity of 6 minus 7 to the 3rd power. So we kind of are going to do 2 separate problems here throughout this, and then we're going to kind of put it together at the end. So I'm going to start with negative square root of 49, and again, there's an invisible negative 1 outside that square root symbol, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think the square root of 49 is? So you're looking for the number times itself that makes 49. If you said 7, you are correct. So again, if you don't know what that is, you can grab your calculator, do second, x squared, 49, close it off, and then hit enter. There's that 7. Then we have plus, and now I'm going to change my ink color. We're going to do 6 minus 7. Again, if you need to do that, 6 minus 7, enter, it's negative 1. Okay, and here's an example where we need to make sure we're paying attention to this number, especially when it's negative. And I'm going to do negative 1 to the 3rd power, negative 1, the caret key, and 3. And that becomes negative 1. So again, why does that end up happening? It's because this means negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Going to the purple here, negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. And then we add those two together to, whoa, that's pretty bad. We're going to add those two together to actually get an answer of, there's my equal sign, of negative 8. So again, folks, square roots and absolute values are grouping symbols. So do everything underneath them first, then perform that specific operation and then finish the problem from there. So here we go, on to our summary. So thinking back to what the focus of this lesson was, here are your sentence starters. What did you learn? Make up your own example and then come up with one question. So that is it, folks, all about square roots and absolute values.